There is a specific moment that reveals more about you than any achievement or failure ever could. It arrives without warning. Someone speaks to you in a way that violates the unspoken contract of human dignity. A tone, a dismissal, a gesture that communicates with perfect clarity that you do not matter, that your presence is negligible, that your voice carries no weight. And in that moment, something ignites. Not immediately, not always visibly, but somewhere beneath your composure, beneath the practiced calm you have learned to wear in public, a reaction forms. Anger, humiliation, the sudden urge to retaliate, to prove, to restore what was taken from you in that exchange. This is disrespect, and the way you respond to it exposes the architecture of your entire psyche. Carl Jung understood that disrespect is never simply about the other person. It is a mirror, a psychic event that forces you to confront everything you have refused to see about yourself. The person who disrespects you is not the problem. They are the messenger, and the message is written in a language you have spent your life avoiding. Most people treat disrespect as an external offense, something that was done to them, an injustice perpetrated by someone who failed to recognize their value. And so they respond from that framework. They defend, they counterattack, they withdraw into resentment. They construct elaborate narratives about the character flaws of the person who disrespected them, the unfairness of the situation, the need to protect their dignity. But none of this addresses what actually happened. What actually happened is that someone touched a wound you did not know was still open. They pressed against a part of your psyche where your sense of worth remains fragile, unintegrated, dependent on external confirmation. And your reaction, immediate, visceral, disproportionate, reveals that you are not responding to them. You are responding to something much older, something unresolved. Jung called this a complex, a knot in the unconscious where emotion, memory, and belief have tangled together into an autonomous structure that reacts before you can think. When disrespect triggers you, it is not the present moment you are experiencing. It is every other moment you were made to feel small, invisible, worthless. Every time your father dismissed your thoughts, every time your voice was ignored in a room full of people, every time you were humiliated and had no power to respond, all of that is stored, compressed, waiting. And when someone disrespects you now, they do not create a new wound. They reopen an old one. This is why your reaction feels so immediate, so total, so uncontrollable. You are not choosing it. The complex is choosing it for you. The wounded child inside your psyche, the one who never received the respect it needed, seizes control. And suddenly you are not an adult navigating a difficult interaction. You are that child again, powerless and desperate to prove that you matter. But Jung did not stop at diagnosis. He understood that the reaction itself contains the path forward. The intensity of your response to disrespect is proportional to the work you have not yet done. It measures the distance between who you believe you are and who you actually are. It reveals where your sense of self remains constructed on external validation rather than internal certainty. If you were genuinely secure in your worth, disrespect would register as information, not injury. You would observe it. You would assess whether it contains useful feedback or whether it reflects the limitations of the person delivering it. And then you would move forward unshaken because nothing they said or did could touch the foundation of your being. But that is not what happens for most people, because most people do not have that foundation. They have a substitute, a scaffolding of accomplishments, roles, and approvals that feels solid until someone tests it. And when disrespect arrives, it exposes the hollowness beneath. It reveals that your sense of worth was never truly yours. It was borrowed, assembled from the opinions of others, and therefore it can be taken away. This is the unbearable realization that disrespect forces upon you. You are not as solid as you believed. Your identity is more fragile than you wanted to admit, and the person who disrespected you is not the villain. They are the catalyst that revealed a truth you were already living but refusing to see. So the question becomes, what do you do with this revelation? The instinctive response is to shore up the defenses, to prove the person wrong, to gather evidence of your worth and force them to acknowledge it, to win the argument, reclaim your status, restore the image of yourself that was momentarily shattered. This is the ego's solution, and it accomplishes nothing. Because even if you succeed, even if you humiliate them back, even if you demonstrate your superiority, even if you extract an apology, the wound remains. You have not healed it. You have simply covered it with a fresh layer of validation that will erode the moment someone else questions you again. You have become dependent on a cycle of proving yourself, over and over, to an audience that will never grant you the permanent security you are seeking. Jung offered a different path. He called it integration. And it begins not with the other person, but with yourself. Integration requires that you stop externalizing the problem. You stop treating disrespect as something that was done to you and start recognizing it as something that revealed you. The emotional reaction you experienced was not caused by their words. It was triggered by them. The cause lies deeper. It lies in the part of your psyche that still requires external confirmation to feel real. This is not weakness. This is the human condition. Every person carries within them a repository of unmet needs, unresolved wounds, and unintegrated aspects of self. The difference is whether you acknowledge this or spend your life pretending it does not exist. Pretending keeps you reactive. Acknowledging creates the possibility of transformation. When someone disrespects you, the first act of consciousness is to pause, not to suppress the reaction, not to perform composure while rage churns beneath the surface, but to genuinely pause and observe what is happening inside you. What is the emotion you are feeling? Where do you feel it in your body? What does it remind you of? What earlier experience does it echo? This is not analysis for the sake of understanding. This is archaeology. You are excavating the layers of your psyche to locate the origin of the response, because that origin is where the real work begins. Most people do not want to do this work. It is easier to blame. It is easier to construct a story in which you are the victim and they are the perpetrator. It is easier to nurse your grievance, to fantasize about revenge, to tell yourself that their disrespect says everything about them and nothing about you. But that story keeps you small. It keeps you dependent. It keeps you trapped in a framework where your emotional state is determined by how others choose to treat you. And as long as you remain in that framework, you will never be free. Freedom, in Jung's understanding, comes from withdrawing the projections. You stop giving other people the power to define your worth. You stop measuring yourself by their reactions. You stop believing that their disrespect diminishes you in any real way, because you have located your value somewhere they cannot touch. But this is not a mental trick. You cannot simply decide to stop caring what others think. That is repression, not integration. True freedom requires that you face the wound directly, that you acknowledge the part of you that does care, that is hurt, that wants desperately to be seen and valued. You do not deny that part. You do not shame it. You bring it into consciousness and ask it what it needs. And what it needs is not their respect. It needs yours. The paradox of disrespect is that it always points inward. The people who disrespect you are showing you where you disrespect yourself. The dismissal you feel from them mirrors the dismissal you have internalized. The way they devalue you reflects the way you have learned to devalue your own voice, your own needs, your own truth. This is the confrontation that most people avoid. It is far easier to focus on the external injustice than to face the internal betrayal. But Jung insisted that the external world is a projection of the internal one. The disrespect you encounter outside is a manifestation of the disrespect you carry within. And until you address the source, the pattern will repeat. Consider how often you silence yourself before anyone else does. How often you dismiss your own thoughts as unimportant. How often you defer to others, not out of respect, but out of a belief that their perspective carries more weight than yours. How often you apologize for existing, for speaking, for taking up space. This is self-disrespect, and it predates every external instance of disrespect you have experienced. You learned it early. You learned it from the people who were supposed to teach you your worth but instead taught you that love was conditional, that acceptance required you to be less than you were, that your value depended on compliance, performance, and the suppression of anything that might provoke disapproval. So you internalized a voice, a judge, a presence in your psyche that monitors your every impulse and finds it lacking, that tells you that you are too much or not enough, that you need to earn the right to be treated with dignity. And because that voice lives inside you, it does not matter how respectfully the external world treats you. You will always hear the disrespect beneath the surface. You will always interpret ambiguity as rejection. You will always find evidence that confirms what you already believe about yourself. This is the prison, and disrespect from others is just the bars becoming visible. Jung's answer is not to fight the external disrespect. It is to dismantle the internal structure that makes you vulnerable to it. This means confronting the internalized voice, recognizing where it came from, understanding that it is not your voice. It is the residue of people who could not see you clearly, who projected their own limitations onto you, who needed you to be smaller so they could feel larger. And once you recognize that, you can begin to separate. You can begin to distinguish between the judgments you absorbed and the truth of what you actually are. You can begin to reclaim the authority over your own worth. This does not happen quickly. It is not a single realization. It is a practice. A repeated act of choosing your own perspective over the internalized voice of diminishment. It is noticing when you are about to silence yourself and choosing to speak anyway. It is recognizing when you are shrinking to avoid conflict and choosing to occupy your full presence instead. It is refusing to apologize for thoughts, needs, and desires that do not harm others but contradict the image of agreeableness you were taught to maintain. Each time you do this, you weaken the internal structure of self-disrespect. You prove to yourself that your worth is not negotiable, that it does not depend on anyone's approval, that you can survive the discomfort of being seen as difficult, arrogant, or selfish, and that those labels are often just attempts to control you back into compliance. But there is another layer, a deeper one, because the work of integration is not just about reclaiming your worth. It is about acknowledging your shadow. Jung understood that every person contains impulses, desires, and capacities they have disowned because they contradict the self-image they need to maintain. You contain cruelty. You contain pettiness. You contain the capacity to disrespect others in exactly the ways you claim to despise. And as long as you deny this, as long as you insist that you are only the virtuous, respectful, morally superior version of yourself, you remain unconscious. You remain fragmented. When someone disrespects you, part of your reaction is not just hurt. It is envy, because they are doing something you forbid yourself to do. They are expressing contempt, asserting dominance, refusing to defer. And somewhere in your psyche, a part of you recognizes that freedom and wants it for yourself. But because you have spent your life performing goodness, performing humility, performing respect for others even when it was not earned, you cannot admit that you want the freedom to be disrespectful when the situation warrants it. So instead of owning that desire, you project it. You make the other person the villain. You tell yourself that their disrespect is proof of their moral inferiority. And by doing so, you avoid confronting the uncomfortable truth that you are not as different from them as you need to believe. Integration means acknowledging this. It means recognizing that you are capable of everything you judge in others. That you have been disrespectful, dismissive, and cruel in ways you rationalized or ignored. That the capacity for shadow behavior exists in you just as it exists in them. And that the intensity of your moral outrage is often proportional to the degree to which you are denying your own shadow. This is not moral relativism. Jung was not suggesting that all behavior is equally acceptable. He was suggesting that consciousness requires honesty. And honesty requires admitting that you are not the pure, unblemished self you present to the world. You are a human being. And human beings contain the full spectrum of possibility, light and dark, constructive and destructive. When you integrate your shadow, something shifts in how you experience disrespect. You stop taking it so personally, because you understand that the person disrespecting you is not responding to your inherent worth. They are responding from their own unconscious. Their own wounds, their own need to assert power in a world where they feel powerless. And while their behavior may be unacceptable, it is no longer a referendum on your value. This allows you to respond rather than react. You can set boundaries without rage. You can disengage without collapsing into self-doubt. You can even confront the behavior directly, not from a place of proving yourself, but from a place of clarity about what is acceptable and what is not. But the most profound shift is internal. When you stop needing others to validate your worth, their disrespect loses its power. It becomes noise. It becomes a reflection of their state, not yours. and you can move through the world without the constant vigilance of someone waiting to be diminished. This is not indifference. It is not detachment. It is presence. It is the ability to remain rooted in your own sense of self regardless of how others choose to engage with you. It is the recognition that your value is not a variable. It is a constant, and no one can take it from you because you are no longer offering it up for evaluation. Jung knew that most people would never arrive at this place. They would spend their lives oscillating between proving themselves and resenting the need to prove themselves. They would remain trapped in the reactive loop, gathering evidence of their worth, demanding recognition, collapsing when it was withheld. They would die without ever realizing that the respect they were seeking from others was only ever meaningful when it came from within. But for those willing to face the discomfort, the path is clear. Disrespect is not the problem. It is the teacher. It shows you where you are still fragmented, where you are still dependent, where you are still living according to a script written by people who could not see you clearly. And when you use it as a mirror instead of a weapon, when you turn toward the wound instead of away from it, when you reclaim the authority over your own worth that you surrendered long ago, then disrespect becomes irrelevant. Not because you have become invulnerable, but because you have become whole. And wholeness does not require external confirmation. It does not need to be seen, validated, or respected by anyone other than yourself. This is what Jung meant when he spoke of individuation. It is the process of becoming who you actually are beneath the layers of adaptation and defense. It is the dissolution of the false self that was constructed to earn love and the emergence of the true self that does not need to be earned. And it begins the moment you stop treating disrespect as an attack and start recognizing it as an invitation. An invitation to examine what remains unhealed, to acknowledge what remains unconscious, to integrate what remains denied. The person who disrespected you will move on. They will forget the interaction. They will continue living in their own unconscious patterns, projecting their own wounds onto whoever crosses their path next. But you do not have to remain in that cycle. You can choose to do the work they are unwilling to do. You can choose to turn the mirror inward. You can choose to stop giving away the power that was always yours. And when you do, you will discover something unsettling. You will discover that the disrespect never mattered. It was always just a signal pointing you back to yourself, back to the place where the real work waits, back to the only confrontation that was ever necessary, the one between who you have been pretending to be and who you actually are.